Hey guys, I'm back. So if you didn't see my last 2 days of filming, or my last two videos, I talked about Audrey and Nicholas's kind of infant feeding slash breastfeeding stories. I'm doing this in honor of World Breastfeeding Week. I'm also working with a couple other moms who also shared their journeys. So you can go to the description box below and click on the links and see their videos about their infant feeding journeys. So let's get started with my final video of the week regarding this, and this is Lou's story. So Lou's story, and Lou is short for Louisa. Louisa is our third baby. She was born November 1st, 2013. She was our largest baby at 8 pounds 6 ounces. Her birth, I went into labor naturally on Halloween, or like just past midnight on Halloween. Wasn't in labor very long. She came naturally, really kind of uneventful. Let's talk about her breastfeeding journey. So if you haven't watched Nicholas and Audrey's videos, click the eye in the sky and go watch those first, because each one is kind of a progression into how I ended up feeding Louisa. So if you watch those, then stay here and listen. Okay, so if you saw Audrey's video, you know Audrey had a tongue tie, but it wasn't diagnosed till about 11 days old, and it wasn't clipped until she was about 15 days old. So I exclusively pumped for her because of that and some other things. So with Louisa, we knew to look for the tongue tie right away. We saw it right away. I could tell by her latch it was too shallow. She wasn't really getting her tongue up over her bottom lip, so we had it clipped on day 2 of life. Right in the hospital, they came, they clipped it, totally uneventful. From there on, her latch still wasn't great. I really struggled because even though you clip it that early in life, they've actually been like doing the sucking motion for like weeks and months prior to being born. So they've actually already gotten in the habit of not pushing their tongue out over their lips. So they kind of have to be kind of coaxed or retrained in how to latch differently. Even though she was only 2 days old. So the way that I did that was when I came home from the hospital, my pediatrician's office at that point had actually instituted a lactation consultant on site, and when you went for your, like, whatever it was, how many days old visit, it's like 24 or 48 hours after you get out of the hospital. When we went for her well visit, she had dropped a significant amount of weight, and she was really jaundiced. And she really wasn't pooping, which meant she really wasn't transferring enough milk. And so he had me meet with the lactation consultant right after the well checkup, and she did where I fed Louisa, and then basically they weighed her on like a scale that did, ounces or point whatever, decimal places. I fed her, then they weighed her again to see really how much milk she had transferred into her stomach, and it was really nothing. So the lactation consultant worked with me on just positioning, and then some like getting a deeper latch and helping her. Like, so when she latched, I'd have to pull out her bottom lip so that she would more likely extend her tongue out. It also helped if you kind of like did this, because it would make her kind of reach with her tongue. I know, it's weird to do on camera. I could see myself doing it, which is even stranger. But anyway, so we did those kinds of exercises. We came home, and at some point I had texted my sister-in-law, and she had said, why don't you try a shield? So I went and got a nursing shield, or a nipple shield, and started that with Louisa, and that really kind of helped with the damage she was doing. I mean, she had just totally like done so much damage. I was just in excruciating pain when I was trying to nurse her, and I was really, really close to throwing in the towel and doing exclusively pumping with her. But I wanted just one baby. If this was going to be my last baby, I wanted to feel what it was like to nurse longer than like a day. I wanted to be able to work really hard to get a successful nursing relationship. So over like the first couple weeks of her life, we went to the doctor like every other day. This was because she just wasn't transferring enough milk. She wasn't pooping enough. She was still semi-jaundiced. And we kept going. And finally, and then at one point we went, like when she was like a 2 weeks old. No, she was like 10 days old. And we met with a doctor that wasn't my normal pediatrician because he wasn't in the office. It was just supposed to be a weight check, and it turned into a very young, naive doctor who had no kids of her own, trying to hand me a bottle of formula and saying, you just need to feed her. And there was no support in her voice in terms of what I was trying to do. So we came home. I brought the bottle home, and I literally, she hadn't pooped in like 2 days at that point. She was still kind of yellow and jaundiced, 10 days old. It's kind of late to be jaundiced. And I finally was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I went to give her the formula bottle, and she pooped everywhere. Literally, I didn't get it in her mouth. And she pooped everywhere, and within the next 48 hours, she had pooped multiple times, and her jaundice was completely gone. Like, you couldn't even tell. She wasn't yellow. Her little eyes weren't yellow, none of that. So it was like the most random thing. So anyway, but she was nursing with a shield for the next 3 months. So as her mouth was just really, really small too. So as her mouth got bigger, she got better at latching. And that went on until she was about 3 months old. And then I slowly weaned her off the shield and just was able to nurse her. So I nursed her. And then at 6 months old, we introduced solid foods. And she got extremely ill from baby oatmeal, like really, really sick, vomiting about 3 to 4 hours after ingestion. That was her second time getting ill. The first time was avocados. The first time we thought it was a stomach virus because it was like spring and we had kids in daycare, or our son was in preschool, so we figured stomach virus. The second time we realized something was really wrong, and it turns out she ended up being diagnosed with a rare disease called FPIES. So what that means is that she cannot tolerate certain proteins in certain foods. So it makes her violently ill. So her FPIES diagnosis was a real struggle for us because that meant that we couldn't just give her anything and everything. We had to go to a special allergist. We had to go to a nutritionist. We had to go to our pediatrician. We went to a GI doctor. There was all kinds of tests being done because by this point she had fallen completely off her growth curve. So she had always really struggled with gaining weight and growing in height. And finally, when we went to feed her solid foods, we realized something was really wrong. And then when she got her diagnosis, we kind of understood because FPIES kids are very often malnourished because, I wouldn't say malnourished, but they struggle with growth because their body doesn't process nutrients like the average child. So, long story short, she was diagnosed. We continued to try and add proteins, worked with a nutritionist and all kinds of things to her diet. She did finally start to grow, but she never jumped back up onto the curve she had started on. And then by the time she was a year old, she really had she just wasn't growing fast enough. And the concern was that at some point her brain growth would be stunted. And that's really when you have issues. So at that point, right around a year, we had to introduce formula, and that was because my breast milk my body was aware that she was a year old, so the fattiness and the richness of my breast milk was gone. And so we had to introduce formula to give her those nutrients because she couldn't have carbohydrates and starches and things that really would give her energy and help her grow. And she really had a limited diet at that point because every new food we needed to add between 6 months and a year old needed a 5-day trial window. And if she failed something, we had to wait 2 weeks after failing it to even start a new food. So as you can imagine, adding new foods was time consuming. So yeah, we had to introduce formula. That was a struggle. And eventually I was basically forced to choose between how hard I worked on my nursing relationship with her and being able to breastfeed her and her health. And obviously health wins out. So to get her to drink the formula, I had to cut her off from breastfeeding. It just was unfortunate. It was pretty traumatic for me. I had worked so hard after exclusively pumping for the first 2. I had done everything I could to make sure that, or everything I could to help get that to actually nurse her. And in the end, I had to choose between her health or that, I don't want to say bond, but nursing her. And obviously, again, her health came first. So we put her on formula from there on out. She stayed on formula from 12 months until recently at about 30 months. We stopped. It is really exciting because the formula was not cheap, but she grew and she finally got on her own curve, and she's finally in the 5th to 10th percentile for height and weight, and that makes her much higher than where she was at 12 months. At 12 months, she wasn't even on the growth chart at all. So that is Louisa's story. It is so different than the others, but it is a result. Many aspects of it are a result of my experiences with the others. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys following along with my 3 stories. As you can see, every kid is different. You do what works for you. It is World Breastfeeding Week, and I really think even if you're not breastfeeding, you should support breastfeeding, because if you use formula, believe it or not, normalizing breastfeeding would actually drastically reduce the cost of formula. It's just a fact. The reason formula companies charge so much is because they know so many people rely on it. So just keep that in mind. But as always, fed is best. That's what I believe. You do what's best for your family. You do what feels right. Comment below. Tell me about your breastfeeding journey. Make sure you look up #FedIsBest. Hit thumbs up if you liked the video. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.